Imagine a boy, just 12 years old, standing before a wild, untamed horse. The beast rears, biting, kicking, refusing every handler. Yet the boy approaches calmly, whispers, and in a single motion, leaps onto its back. The crowd gasps. The horse obeys. This boy is Alexander, and within 2 decades, he will rule an empire stretching from Greece to India. But how does a boy become a legend? This is the story of Alexander the Great, a man who lived only 32 years, yet carved his name deeper into history than most kings who ruled for a lifetime. He was not only a conqueror, but also a dreamer, driven by ambition, divine visions, and an unrelenting belief in his destiny. His empire would span continents, topple ancient kingdoms, and reshape the world. But first, we must return to where it all began, to a small kingdom in the north of Greece, to the land of Macedonia. Macedonia, mid-4th century BCE, a rugged land often dismissed by the powerful city-states of Athens and Sparta as barbaric. Yet under King Philip II, Macedonia was rising. Philip was no ordinary king. He was a soldier, a strategist, and a visionary. Through discipline and innovation, he transformed his army into an unstoppable force, wielding the deadly Sarissa pike. In 356 BCE, Philip received news that would change the course of history. His wife, Olympias, had given birth to a son. The night Alexander was born, legend tells of strange omens. The temple of Artemis in Ephesus burned to the ground, and seers whispered that a world-destroying force had entered the earth. Olympias, Alexander's mother, was fiercely ambitious. She believed her son was destined for greatness, perhaps even the son of Zeus himself. She whispered divine destiny into his ears. Philip, equally ambitious, ensured the boy was shaped for kingship. By age 13, Alexander's education began under one of the greatest minds of the ancient world, Aristotle. The philosopher taught him philosophy, ethics, politics, medicine, and the wonders of the natural world. But more than knowledge, Aristotle gave Alexander a vision, the idea of a unified world where Greek culture could spread across the known lands. Still, Alexander was not just a student. He was a warrior in the making. He trained relentlessly in combat, hunting lions in the Macedonian hills, wielding sword and spear. He proved fearless. At just 16, when his father was away at war, Alexander commanded troops against a rebellious tribe. He crushed them, founded a city, Alexandropolis, and named it after himself. But his first true moment of glory came with the horse, Bucephalus, the great stallion that no man could tame. Philip's men had given up, but young Alexander noticed something others missed. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned the stallion toward the sun, mounted, and rode. The impossible had become possible. The crowd erupted. Philip wept, declaring, "My son, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." This was no ordinary child. This was a boy convinced he was destined for greatness. But destiny often demands a price, and Alexander's rise would soon be forged in blood, betrayal, and conquest, as the shadow of assassination began to fall over Philip II. The year is 336 BCE. A wedding feast fills the palace at Igi with music, wine, and celebration. But in a flash, blood spills across the floor. King Philip II lies dead, struck down by an assassin's blade. The great strategist who raised Macedonia to power is gone. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Was it revenge, a personal feud, or a plot deeper, darker, born from court rivalries? In the chaos, a young man steps forward, only 20 years old. crowned in gold. The soldiers shout his name. Alexander is king. The throne was his, but not yet secure. Enemies circled like vultures. Greek city-states rebelled, doubting the youth's strength. The northern tribes tested him with raids and uprisings, but Alexander moved with lightning speed. He crushed rebellions, stormed mountain strongholds, and reminded Greece of Macedonia's iron grip. In Thebes, defiance rose. The city declared independence. Alexander responded with fire. He led his army through the gates, and when the dust settled, Thebes was ash and rubble. The message was clear: resist and be destroyed. Athens and the rest of Greece fell silent. Now his path was open. His father's unfinished dream lay before him: to unite Greece and march against the greatest empire the world had ever seen, the Persian Empire. Persia was vast. From the Aegean to India, it stretched like a colossus, ruled by King Darius III. Gold, armies, fleets. The empire seemed untouchable. But Alexander hungered for glory. He claimed vengeance for the Persian invasions of Greece a century earlier, and with 40,000 men, he crossed the Hellespont in 334 BCE. Legend says, upon reaching Asia, Alexander hurled a spear into the soil, declaring it conquered by right of war. Then he marched inland. His first test came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Persian satraps, local governors, gathered a powerful army. The river's current roared as Macedonians charged across. Arrows rained down, horses thrashed in water. But Alexander, fearless at the head of his cavalry, struck like thunder. He cut through the Persians, scattering them. Asia Minor lay open. As he advanced, cities surrendered. Some opened their gates willingly, others resisted and were crushed. At Halicarnassus, siege engines smashed against walls, flames engulfed towers. Nothing stopped the young conqueror. But conquest was not only about war. Alexander carried with him a vision. Everywhere he went, he established new cities, many named Alexandria. He encouraged intermarriage, blending Greek and local cultures. His empire would not simply be ruled, it would be united. Still, Persia's heart remained unbroken. Darius himself now prepared to face the young king. In 333 BCE, their armies met at Issus. The Persian force was immense, perhaps 100,000 strong, stretching across the plain. Darius stood in his royal chariot, banners flying, drums pounding. Against him, Alexander's army was outnumbered. But numbers meant nothing to the man who believed he was born of gods. The battle erupted in chaos. Persian cavalry thundered forward. Macedonian phalanxes braced with 18-foot spears. Screams, steel, blood. Amid the frenzy, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a wedge formation, aiming straight for Darius. The young king's armor flashed in the sun as he cut down foes in his path. Closer, closer. Darius saw him coming and fled. The Persian king abandoned his family, his army, his honor. Panic spread. Tens of thousands were slain or captured. Alexander entered the royal tent and found treasures beyond imagining, and Darius's mother, wife, and children. But instead of cruelty, he showed mercy. He treated them with dignity, winning both respect and loyalty. At Issus, a new truth was written. The might of Persia could not stop Alexander. But Darius still lived, and he would return with a vengeance. As the Macedonian king marched south, toward the legendary city of Tyre, a siege awaited that would test his will like never before. The city of Tyre, an island fortress rising from the Mediterranean, its walls towering 100 feet high, defended by the finest navy of the Phoenicians. For centuries, Tyre had defied invaders. Now Alexander demanded its surrender. But the Tyrians laughed. The sea, they believed, would protect them. Alexander answered with defiance. If the sea was their shield, he would turn the sea into land. Day by day, his men hauled stone and timber into the water, building a massive causeway stretching from the mainland to the island. Persian ships harassed them. Arrows darkened the sky, and Tyrian fireships set the works ablaze. But Alexander rebuilt, stronger each time. Siege towers rose, catapults thundered. After 7 relentless months, the causeway reached the city. Alexander's forces stormed the walls, and Tyre fell in fire and blood. The world learned nothing could withstand his will. From there, he turned south. In Egypt, the people greeted him not as a conqueror, but a liberator from Persian rule. In Memphis, priests crowned him pharaoh, and in the desert of Siwa, he journeyed to the oracle of Ammon. There, the high priest greeted him not as a mortal, but as the son of Zeus. Alexander emerged with a new conviction. He was not merely king, he was divine. But Darius was not yet finished. The Persian king gathered the full might of his empire for one last stand. In 331 BCE, on the plains of Gaugamela, the fate of the world would be decided. The Persians numbered perhaps 200,000. At the center stood Darius, armored in gold, determined to erase the shame of Issus. Alexander's army was a fraction of the size, barely 40,000 men, but they were disciplined, seasoned, and led by a commander who had never lost. The battle began with thunder. Persian chariots surged forward, blades spinning, horses screaming. Yet Alexander had prepared. His men opened their ranks, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through, then cut them down from behind. Then the great clash. Cavalry smashed into cavalry, infantry locked shields, the ground trembling beneath their spears. Dust choked the air, but Alexander was already in motion. He led his companion cavalry in a brilliant feint, pulling Persian forces to the flank, then wheeled and drove straight for the center, straight for Darius. The king's chariot loomed ahead. Alexander, lance lowered, eyes fixed. Closer, closer. Darius's nerve broke. Once again, the great king fled, and once again, his army collapsed around him. The Battle of Gaugamela was over. Persia had fallen. The empire of Cyrus the Great, built over centuries, was shattered in a single day. Alexander rode into Babylon, welcomed as a king. The treasures of Persepolis lay within his grasp. The dream of conquering the world was no longer a dream, it was reality. But dreams have a way of turning into obsessions, and Alexander's hunger was not yet satisfied. Beyond Persia lay new horizons, India, and the edge of the known world. And so, with his sword raised high, he marched eastward. As the jungles of the Indus Valley began to rise before him, the Indus Valley, a land of rivers, jungles, and warriors unlike any Alexander had faced before. Here, in 326 BCE, he confronted King Porus, ruler of a vast kingdom. Porus was no ordinary foe. He rode into battle atop a towering war elephant, his army a wall of tusks and steel. The two forces clashed at the Battle of the Hydaspes River. Rain poured, the river surged. Alexander's troops struggled in the mud as elephants charged, trampling men beneath their feet, tusks impaling horses. The Macedonian phalanx wavered. For the first time, victory seemed uncertain. But Alexander adapted. His cavalry outflanked Porus's forces, cutting into the rear. The elephants panicked, trampling their own men. When the dust cleared, Porus was defeated. And yet, Alexander did not treat him as a prisoner. When asked how he wished to be treated, Porus replied, "Like a king." And Alexander, impressed by his courage, granted him not only his throne, but more territory. Even in conquest, he sought loyalty through honor. But his men were weary. They had marched thousands of miles, fought countless battles, and now faced endless rains, strange beasts, and unknown lands. When Alexander pressed them to march farther east, to the end of the world itself, they refused. For the first time, the unstoppable king was stopped, not by enemies, but by his own army. Reluctantly, he turned back. The journey home was brutal. Through the Gedrosian desert, his men suffered thirst and starvation. Tens of thousands perished. But Alexander marched on, sharing their hardships, refusing water unless his soldiers could drink as well. This was the bond that kept their loyalty even at the edge of despair. By 323 BCE, he returned to Babylon, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen. From Greece to Egypt, Persia to India, his domains stretched across continents. Yet at the height of his power, tragedy struck. In the palace of Babylon, Alexander fell ill. Fever consumed him. Some whispered poison, others exhaustion and wounds finally claiming their price. For days, he lay silent, unable to speak. His generals gathered, desperate for a final command. When asked who would inherit his empire, Alexander whispered only, "To the strongest." Days later, at just 32 years old, Alexander the Great was dead. The empire fractured. His generals carved it into kingdoms. The dream of unity crumbled. But Alexander's legacy did not die. In every city he founded, his name endured. Greek culture mingled with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian traditions, creating a new world, the Hellenistic Age. Art, science, philosophy, and trade flourished across borders. The world was forever changed by the vision of one man. More than 2,000 years later, his name still commands awe. Alexander the Great, the boy who tamed a horse, who conquered empires, who believed he was born of gods, and who left a legacy larger than life itself. But his story is not only about battles and crowns. It is about ambition without limits, about the human drive to reach beyond what seems possible, and about the price that such dreams demand. As Alexander once said, "There is nothing impossible to him who will try."